What if the unthinkable happened? If zombie hordes grew large enough to dominate an entire planet? And this would be a doomsday outbreak in which humanity is driven to the brink of extinction. Improbable, yes. Impossible, no. In a world full of economic uncertainty, international unrest, and a partisan political atmosphere, it is easy to forget the most deadly and ominous threat humanity faces: the living dead. Thankfully, Max Brooks' New York Times bestseller, The Zombie Survival Guide, provides a detailed plan in order to survive an inevitable zombie attack. When the living dead triumph, the world degenerates into utter chaos. All social order evaporates. Those in power, along with their families and associates, hole up in bunkers and secure areas around the country. With the total collapse of law and order, small bands of individuals emerge to assert their authority. In this scenario, you and your closest friends must be able to escape all civilization, find a remote, uninhabited corner of our planet, and rebuild your lives from scratch. General rules. Number 1, assemble a group. A collective response is always preferable to an individual attempt. A group will extend your financial resources, and a greater variety of skills will also be available. 2, study, study, study. Even if you were to find yourself in some desolate, hostile environment with no tools whatsoever, the knowledge stored in your brain would still put you light years ahead of even the most well-equipped zombie. 3, wean yourself off of luxury items. Living through a zombie outbreak would leave you with little choice. In ideal conditions, it would be impossible to grow or produce every food or chemical you now enjoy. 4, remain vigilant. At the first sign of an outbreak, bizarre homicides, missing persons, unusual diseases, contradictory press, and government involvement, contact all members of your group. Begin discussing your plans for evacuation. 5, to the ends of the earth. Urban zones will, in the immediate future, become the center of vicious combat between the living and the dead. Even if your zombie fortress survives these street battles, it would eventually fall victim to extreme military measures, such as saturation bombing. But no matter what happens to the surviving humans, there will always be the walking dead. With glazed eyes and gawking mouths, their putrid forms will cover the earth, hunting all living things within their grasp. Zombies are not merely a threat of the future or a risk to the present, but a historical menace. No fictional account more accurately portrays their infiltration than the romance Pride and Prejudice and Zombies by Jane Austen and Seth Grahame-Smith. Elizabeth Bennet had been obliged, by the scarcity of gentlemen, to sit down for 2 dances, and during part of that time Mr. Darcy had been standing near enough for her to hear a conversation between him and Mr. Bingley, who came from the dance for a few minutes to press his friend to join into it. "Come, Darcy," said he, "I must have you dance. I hate to see you standing about and by yourself in this stupid manner." Mr. Darcy, turning round, looked for a moment at Elizabeth, till catching her eye, he withdrew his own and coldly said, "I am in no humour at present to give consequence to young ladies who are slighted by other men." As Mr. Darcy walked off, Elizabeth felt her blood run cold. She had never in her life been so insulted. The warrior code demanded she avenge her honor. Elizabeth reached down to her ankle, taking care not to draw attention. There her hand met the dagger concealed beneath her dress. She meant to follow this proud Mr. Darcy outside and open his throat. But no sooner had she grabbed the handle of her weapon than a chorus of screams filled the assembly hall, immediately joined by the shattering of window panes. Unmentionables poured in, their movements clumsy yet swift, their burial clothing in a range of untidiness. Some wore gowns so tattered as to render them scandalous. Others wore suits so filthy that one would assume they were assembled from little more than dirt and dried blood. Their flesh was in various degrees of putrefaction. The freshly stricken were slightly green and pliant, whereas the longer dead were gray and brittle, their eyes and tongues long since turned to dust, and their lips pulled back into everlasting skeletal smiles. A few of the guests who had the misfortune of being too near the windows were seized and feasted on at once. When Elizabeth stood, she saw Mrs. Long struggle to free herself as 2 female dreadfuls bit into her head, cracking her skull like a walnut and sending a shower of dark blood spouting as high as the chandeliers. As guests fled in every direction, Mr. Bennet's voice cut through the commotion. "Girls, pentagram of death!" Elizabeth immediately joined her 4 sisters in the center of the dance floor. Each girl produced a dagger from her ankle and stood at the tip of an imaginary 5-pointed star. From the center of the room, they began stepping outward in unison, each thrusting a razor-sharp dagger with one hand, the other hand modestly tucked into the small of her back. From a corner of the room, Mr. Darcy watched Elizabeth and her sisters work their way outward, beheading zombie after zombie as they went. By the time the girls reached the walls of the assembly hall, the last of the unmentionables lay still. Although presented with such conclusive and alarming evidence, some people still question the authenticity of the unmentionable living dead. Stanford University noted the problem, and their philosophy department produced one of the most compelling philosophical examinations into logic for and against the existence of zombies. Zombies are exactly like us in all physical respects, but have no conscious experiences. By definition, there is nothing it is like to be a zombie. Yet zombies behave like us, and some even spend a lot of time discussing consciousness. This disconcerting fantasy helps to make the problem of phenomenal consciousness vivid, especially as a problem for physicalism. Few people think zombies actually exist, but many hold they are at least conceivable, and some say that they are logically or metaphysically possible. It is argued that if zombies are so much as a bare possibility, then physicalism is false and some kind of dualism must be accepted. For many philosophers, that is the chief importance of the zombie idea. But the idea is also of interest for its presuppositions about the nature of consciousness and how the physical and the phenomenal are related. Use of the zombie idea against physicalism also raises more general questions about relations between imaginability, conceivability, and possibility. Finally, zombies raise epistemological difficulties. They reinstate the other minds problem. Chalmers, too, finds the conceivability of zombies obvious. He remarks that it certainly seems that a coherent situation is described. I can discern no contradiction in the description. However, he recognizes that this intuition cannot be relied on. The nature of consciousness is, after all, hard to understand. Clearly, those who maintain that zombies are conceivable must provide support for that claim, recognizing that, as an epistemic claim dependent on our cognitive abilities, it is defeasible. While the quest to determine whether or not zombies exist continues, some people have adopted a more pragmatic approach to the living dead, learning how to live with them. 13 Wednesday even went so far as to explore the possibility of humans and zombies forming romantic attachments in I Walked with a Zombie. I'm cursed if I voodoo, and I'm dead if I don't. Kick the crypt and baby walk with me, and we'll find a new place to haunt. See you in the graveyard at midnight, such a horrifying delight. Your ice-cold touch, it feels so right. And just last night I walked with a zombie. 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 Her stare is so demanding, and her groans are so commanding. She makes me feel like a kid in a candy shop, with my head on the butcher block. You're the only one for me. I'm in love with the decomposing zombie. Beauty's on duty in this horror movie. Make me spill my guts with just one touch.